Introduction. I have sailed many seas, yet none so treacherous as the waters of a child's heart when met with parents who lack true emotional depth. Some believe that with age comes wisdom, and that older folks naturally offer maturity. But I've witnessed a different reality. Sometimes, children arrive in this world already more attuned to their feelings than parents who've lived decades. When a parent fails to respond to a child's emotional needs, an emptiness can set in. A loneliness just as real and harmful as any lack of physical care. Growing up under emotionally immature parents can carve out a void of emotional loneliness that shapes a person's choices in life, including how they love and whom they choose as partners. Here, I'll explain how such parents affect their children, especially those with sensitive hearts, and offer a way to ease the hurt and confusion that come from dealing with someone who recoils from genuine closeness. You see, emotionally immature parents fear strong feelings. They pull away from true connection. Rather than facing hardship head-on, they resist it, avoiding any real self-reflection. Owning up to mistakes, apologizing, these things don't come naturally to them. As a result, they're inconsistent and unreliable in giving emotional support. Their own survival impulses overshadow their children's emotional needs. This isn't some new tale either. Our oldest myths tell of children left without proper care, forced to find solace and guidance from other sources because their parents were too absent or self-involved. The theme persists in the stories we love today. Books, movies, even the news echo with examples of children growing up under the weight of an unresponsive or manipulative caregiver. Once you recognize the signs of emotional immaturity, you begin to understand why you might feel so alone, even if your parents insist they love you. Understanding your parents' emotional limits can be freeing. You learn to see them as they truly are, rather than hoping they'll become someone they can't be. The frustration, that sense of doubt in your own worth, it begins to lift when you see they're simply trapped by their own immaturity. From there, you can reclaim your inner self, stop pouring energy into forcing a change that will never come, and find a more balanced way of relating to them. In the pages ahead, I'll describe exactly why your parents might have been unable to give you the emotional sustenance you needed. You'll see why you often felt invisible, even when they swore you were dear to them. We'll delve into the reasons your honest attempts to connect or reason with them never truly bridged the gap. Chapter 1 explores how emotionally immature parents create loneliness that can echo well into adulthood. You'll meet those who grew up without that vital emotional link and discover how heightened self-awareness can begin to mend this hurt. Chapters 2 and 3 detail the traits of emotionally immature parents and the typical conflicts that arise from their behavior. You'll find a checklist to pinpoint specific areas of their immaturity, along with clues as to why they stopped growing in this way. Chapter 4 outlines 4 main types of emotionally immature parents and offers insight into the coping methods children develop when raised by each type. Chapter 5 dives into how people lose track of their own true nature to fit a role in the family. You'll learn about 2 types of children, internalizers and externalizers, and why even siblings can react so differently under the same roof. Chapter 6 focuses on internalizers, who often seek self-reflection and growth. Many who read these words might recognize themselves here, taking on more than their fair share of emotional labor, apologizing for needing help, and prioritizing others' desires above their own. Chapter 7 tells the stories of those who, after long denial, finally allowed themselves to feel their unmet needs, often the moment they sought guidance or therapy. In facing what they'd buried, they regained trust in their instincts and learned to truly know themselves. Chapter 8 explains the maturity awareness approach. You'll see how to recognize emotional immaturity in others without taking it personally. Knowing when to step back, rather than sink into frustration, restores your peace and confidence. Chapter 9 shares how this mindset has freed others from guilt, confusion, and the draining cycle of trying to please parents who just don't grow. They shifted focus to their own deeper needs and found healthier ways to relate. Chapter 10 teaches you to seek people who treat you well and can meet you on a level of genuine give and take. By changing old patterns, you'll discover relationships where you no longer feel so alone. When you finish, you'll have new eyes for spotting emotional immaturity. Many questions about feeling unseen or misunderstood will start to make sense. Rather than blaming yourself, you'll learn to manage the empathy you've always offered so freely. You'll be able to save that warmth for those who can give it back in return. And in time, you'll find that deeper intimacy you've sought is well within reach. I've wandered far, watched many families, and listened to countless stories from those whose parents simply weren't ready to love in a mature way. Over time, I've come to see this truth hidden in plain sight. Our society often shields parents from criticism, but some are simply too self-absorbed to truly nurture a child's heart. My purpose here is to offer relief from the confusion and anguish that arise in the children of such parents. If even a small part of this helps you understand yourself or them, then I'll have done right by you. May these words restore a bit of clarity, showing you that your worth isn't bound by their limitations. After all, you've felt this deeper knowledge stirring within you for some time, haven't you? I'm here to confirm you were right all along. Chapter 1. How emotionally immature parents affect their adult children's lives. I've traveled far and observed many families, and it has become clear to me that true emotional closeness with our caretakers is what first nurtures our sense of safety. When that closeness is missing, when parents either cannot or will not engage deeply, a lingering sense of loneliness settles in. Even if one's physical needs are met, the absence of genuine emotional connection can leave a wound that follows a person into adulthood. Some discover this loneliness from an early age, sensing that they are unseen by parents who are absorbed in their own cares. Others meet it later, if a once close relationship grows cold. But whenever this loneliness begins, it often signals that a child's emotional needs were never fully recognized. Growing up under emotionally immature parents can be a lonely experience indeed. Such parents might manage the basics, putting food on the table, providing shelter. But if they do not reach out with honest warmth, a hollow feeling forms where genuine security ought to be. This emptiness is every bit as painful as a physical wound, yet it is invisible, hard to describe, and sometimes even harder for a child to comprehend. Rather than questioning their parents' capabilities, children often sense only a vague emptiness, an ache that they assume must be normal. With a mature parent, a child finds solace simply by seeking their comfort. But a parent who dreads strong feelings tends to leave a child feeling as though the child's longing for reassurance is somehow shameful. Over time, many grown men and women still carry that quiet emptiness. Even as they build what appears to be a normal life, work, marriage, children, inside they remain haunted by that lingering sense of aloneness. Often they choose partners or friends who mirror the same emotional distance they knew in childhood, not realizing they are recreating the very environment that once hurt them. Yet the good news is that by growing more aware of these patterns, people can learn to break them. They can begin to offer themselves the supportive presence they never received. Emotional intimacy. Genuine. Emotional intimacy is knowing you have someone to whom you can reveal anything, the good and the bad, and feel accepted. It does not require constant chatter. Sometimes simply being together and understanding silence brings that deep sense of connection. This sense of security flourishes when parents handle not just their children's physical needs, but also welcome their feelings and curiosities. Parents who have grown into their own emotional maturity are comfortable with vulnerability, both in themselves and in others. They watch their children carefully, sense their moods, and offer empathy. The child, in turn, learns that coming to their parent, whether in excitement or sadness, is safe and encouraged. Such relationships are built on consistency. A mature parent remains dependable, always showing the child that emotions are neither threats nor nuisances, but windows to understanding one another. This fosters a confidence in the child, who feels truly seen, and knows exactly where they can turn for support. Emotional loneliness. Conversely, emotionally immature parents are so wrapped up in their own concerns that they fail to notice their child's inner world. They shy away from emotional closeness because they are uneasy with powerful feelings, whether those feelings are their own or their child's. In times of distress, these parents may become irritated and punish a child rather than draw them close for reassurance. The child's natural impulse to seek warmth is met with discomfort or anger, and the door to closeness slams shut. When parental support is lacking, a child senses something amiss, but cannot always name it. Many simply assume this emptiness is unique to them. They have no idea it's the natural response to not receiving enough empathy or understanding. So they learn to bury their feelings and keep going. This is what we call emotional loneliness, the pain of having no one truly attuned to what is unfolding inside you. David's story. David once spoke with me about the loneliness he felt in his childhood home. He called it a fact of his existence. His family provided meals, a roof, and the usual daily routines, but there was no sense of closeness, just parallel lives moving side by side, never intersecting. David remembered an image from his teenage years, drifting alone in the ocean, no land in sight. For a long time, he simply thought this was normal. Rhonda's story. Rhonda recalled a day when her family was preparing to move from one house to another. She stood by the moving truck with her parents and siblings, but no one was talking or explaining anything to her. Despite being physically in their midst, she felt entirely on her own. Looking back, she realized how anxious she was, left to figure out a significant life change without a single reassuring word. She learned to stand apart in her family, managing her own worries in silence. The message within emotional loneliness. That sense of emptiness is not a flaw, nor is it a sign of selfishness. It is a signal that a child, or an adult, yearns for the kind of connection they have not received. As soon as a person becomes aware of this, they can begin seeking relationships that offer more genuine closeness. This step often requires acknowledging the reality of childhood neglect. It may feel uncomfortable at first, but recognizing the roots of loneliness is the first step toward finding a better way forward. How children cope with emotional loneliness. Because loneliness is so distressing, children often develop ways to capture at least some sliver of closeness from an emotionally absent parent. Many learn to put the parent's needs first, believing that by taking care of others, they might at least find acceptance. This can turn into a habit of people-pleasing, one that persists into adulthood and often leads to the same lonely feelings. Some children become so self-sufficient that they seem like little adults, handling their own problems and rarely asking for help. They carry that self-sufficiency onward, leaving home early, entering relationships quickly, or starting families of their own, trying to find in the wider world what they never had at home. Why the past repeats itself. The tragedy is that, having grown accustomed to emotionally unavailable parents, these children often repeat the same dynamic when they choose friends or romantic partners. Familiarity, even when painful, can feel safer than the unknown. Add to that a child's natural reluctance to see faults in their parents, and you have a cycle where one grows up not fully questioning neglectful behaviors. If you cannot spot that behavior, you may not see it in others until it is too late. Sophie's story. Sophie found herself in a long-term relationship with Jerry, a man she loved, but who offered little emotional warmth. Sophie desperately wanted a marriage and family, but Jerry seemed perfectly content to keep things as they were. One evening, Jerry handed her a small box at dinner, hinting it might be something more. Sophie's heart pounded. She thought perhaps he was finally proposing. Inside the box was only a slip of paper with a question mark. When she looked at him, stunned, he said it was just a joke. Sophie was crushed. Yet when she told her mother sided with Jerry, brushing off Sophie's hurt as overreacting. In that moment, Sophie realized her mother and Jerry both shared a painful lack of empathy, something she had lived with her entire life. Until then, she had not fully seen that she was re-experiencing the same loneliness she felt as a child, feeling guilty for being unhappy. Some, like Sophie, are outwardly successful. They feel they ought to be content with all they have. So why do they feel miserable? When physical needs are met, but emotional needs go unfulfilled, people often wrestle with guilt, telling themselves they shouldn't complain. Many stay in unhappy marriages or continue living a life that seems complete on the surface. But that emptiness inside doesn't dissipate just because one has a job, a home, or other trappings of success. Emotional loneliness transcends gender. I have listened to men who share the same quiet heartache. Our societies often encourage men to be stoic, but the longing for emotional closeness is no less real for them. Some men may feel they have no right to crave a tender bond, but the truth is, we all need that kind of warmth. Jake's story. Jake had recently married Kayla, a cheerful and loving partner. Yet Jake found himself feeling low and uneasy, convinced that he had to be as buoyant and upbeat as Kayla. He worried that if he showed any vulnerability, Kayla would see him as weak. In truth, Kayla had never given him reason to believe that. Jake was reliving the fear he had once felt toward a volatile, disapproving mother who equated emotional need with weakness. It took time before he recognized he could lower his guard with Kayla and still be accepted. Feeling trapped in taking care of parents. For some, loneliness persists in the form of relationships with parents who still behave as though they own them. These adults feel saddled with demands that drain them of energy to seek healthier connections. They learn to associate relationships with burden, making them reluctant to marry or develop close friendships, believing that closeness inevitably brings obligation and guilt. Louise's story. Louise, a teacher, lived with her mother, a retired officer who expected Louise to remain at home indefinitely, tending to her every need. The pressure grew so overwhelming that Louise began experiencing suicidal thoughts. When she finally tried to leave, her mother scorned the idea, claiming Louise would regret it and that she couldn't survive without Louise's help. Louise discovered that the guilt she feared was far less damaging than staying in an emotionally stifling arrangement. Leaving was difficult, but it ultimately saved her spirit. Not trusting your instincts. Children whose parents fail to validate their feelings often learn to disregard their own inner signals. As adults, they may fall into relationships that do not satisfy them, yet they stay, convinced it is their duty to make it work. They've been taught to think that longing for closeness is selfish, that they should be grateful for what they have, no matter how empty it feels. Megan's story. Megan grew up under parents who favored her boyfriend over her own instincts. Though she felt a lack of compatibility, she married him after an unplanned pregnancy in college. Her parents insisted it was best. Through the years, Megan found herself unhappy, disregarded, and lonely. Yet she felt guilty about the mere thought of leaving. It wasn't until she recognized how much her emotional needs were being brushed aside that she allowed herself to speak the truth. Finally, Megan saw she deserved someone who wanted to truly know and value her, rather than dismiss her feelings as too much. Lacking self-confidence due to parental rejection. When parents are consistently dismissive, children often carry into adulthood the belief that they must hide their needs. If that rejection taught them anything, it was to keep silent to avoid further hurt. Yet this can mean they never open up to people who might genuinely care about them. Therapy or personal reflection can help reveal that this protective stance, once necessary in childhood, may no longer serve them well. Ben's story. Ben grew up with a critical, distant mother who kept him in a low position within the family. As an adult, he questioned why his loving wife, Alexa, chose him at all. He assumed she must tire of him if he showed her his true feelings. He refused to confide in her about his struggles. Sure, she had better things to do than hear his woes. Yet Alexa had never suggested any such thing. Ben was simply projecting his mother's rejection onto his marriage. It took time and courage for him to realize Alexa wanted to know his heart and wouldn't ridicule him for having needs. Charlotte's story. Charlotte, an accomplished journalist, finally submitted a short story to a contest at a friend's urging. When she won, instead of celebrating, she grew anxious, anticipating someone would mock or discredit her. She remembered all the times in childhood when her parents dismissed her achievements. She kept her triumph quiet, convinced no one truly wanted to hear about it. Her past overshadowed what should have been a moment of joy. Childhood loneliness beneath adult success. Some who grew up without emotional support still build impressive adult lives. They may find loving partners or carve out successful careers, yet the old loneliness can linger. Unresolved feelings can surface as anxiety, depression, or nightmares. Even when a life appears stable, the child once ignored still longs for reassurance. Natalie's story. Natalie, an award-winning consultant, stands before her clients each day with confidence. Yet at night, she dreams of being trapped, tasked with solving impossible challenges all alone. These recurring nightmares mirror how she felt as a child. Left to handle emotional burdens her parents shrugged off. Natalie's mother still lives with her and complains incessantly about not receiving enough attention. Natalie tries to be caring, but receives no real reciprocation. Through reflection, she realized her nightmares were rooted in her childhood role, the little adult who took care of everyone else, even as she felt completely alone inside. Why it feels so bad to live without emotional connection. From our earliest history, humans have survived through community. Those who ventured off by themselves risked peril. The longing for closeness is woven into our very nature. Feeling alone cuts against our most fundamental instincts. There is no shame in needing a bond that truly nurtures you. It is the same longing that drove our ancestors to huddle together for warmth and protection. Summary. Emotional loneliness, whether in childhood or adulthood, stems from missing the very core of human connection. Genuine, reliable intimacy. When parents are emotionally immature, they cannot tolerate closeness or tend to a child's deeper needs. This deficiency can dent a child's self-confidence, leading to a repeating cycle of distance and disappointment. Even those who excel in their adult lives may carry hidden anxieties from that early neglect. Fortunately, the first key to freeing oneself from these patterns is understanding how a parent's immaturity set the stage. By recognizing what happened, one can avoid falling into the same traps. With that knowledge in hand, it becomes possible to nurture relationships that offer true companionship and acceptance. In the chapters that follow, we will examine precisely how to recognize emotionally immature parents and learn methods for healing the injuries they leave behind. Chapter 2. Recognizing the emotionally immature parent. I have often watched good people struggle with how to see their parents in a clear light. Many hesitate, fearing they are somehow betraying the ones who raised them if they dare notice any shortcomings. But consider that understanding is not the same as disrespect. Seeing our parents for who they truly are can free us from confusion and misgivings about our own worth. Recognizing emotional immaturity is not a slanderous act. It is a path toward clarity. Once we understand how and why a parent behaves the way they do, we can make sense of our own experiences and forge a healthier path forward. Most emotionally immature parents never intend to hurt their children. Much of the harm they cause comes from their own blind spots. They simply do not see their effect on others. In reading about the traits that follow, you may grow more confident in labeling your parents' limitations without feeling guilty. In truth, your parents need never know about this awareness. This is for your peace of mind, to uncover your history and your sense of self. What matters is that you can finally stop blaming your feelings on an invisible flaw in yourself and recognize the role your parents' immaturity has played. Exercise. Assessing your parents' emotional immaturity. Let us begin by considering some common signs of emotional immaturity. You might see echoes of these in one or both of your parents. They tend to overreact to small disturbances,
They rarely show empathy or self-awareness. They are uncomfortable discussing genuine feelings and avoid emotional closeness. They seem easily irritated by viewpoints that differ from their own. They may have used you as a sounding board or confidant, while never acting as one for you. They often speak or act without concern for others' emotions. They gave you attention primarily in extreme situations, like a serious illness, but not otherwise. They can seem wise one moment, deeply unreasonable the next. If you were upset, they tended to respond with something superficial or dismissive, or even with sarcasm. Their conversation revolved around themselves more often than not. Even gentle disagreement puts them on the defensive. They show little interest in your successes, or brush them off. They cling to their own opinions despite clear evidence to the contrary. They rarely reflect on their contribution to problems, shifting blame instead. They view the world in all or nothing terms and reject new perspectives. If your parent matches multiple traits, you may very well have faced an emotionally immature parent. Keep in mind, there is a difference between a fleeting moment of poor behavior, something we have all been guilty of, and the consistent pattern of stunted emotional growth. Personality pattern versus temporary emotional regression. We all have our moments of misjudgment or childishness when we are fatigued, anxious, or under pressure. But that is different from a persistent, deeply rooted habit. An emotionally immature parent regularly displays the same set of reactions because they have never learned to self-reflect. They see no reason to regret or apologize, for in their view, they have done nothing wrong. This lack of introspection is a hallmark of a true pattern, rather than an isolated outburst. Defining maturity. Before delving further, it is helpful to define maturity. In my years of traveling and observing, I have seen that emotionally mature people balance a keen awareness of their inner lives with a genuine desire to stay open and empathetic toward others. They are capable of functioning on their own and forming close connections, without either trait overshadowing the other. When trouble arises, they handle conflict by being direct and honest. No need to rely on denial or blame. Able to reflect on themselves, these individuals form a well-developed identity and navigate life with a steadiness
that earns the trust of those around them. Personality traits associated with emotional immaturity. Now, let us examine a contrasting set of traits typical of those who remain stunted in their emotional growth. They are rigid and single-minded. On the surface, an emotionally immature person may be quite successful if life's demands fall neatly into their comfort zone. Yet when it comes to interpersonal closeness or emotional hurdles, their immaturity rises to the surface. They can cling stubbornly to one viewpoint, as though threatened by anything that expands beyond their narrow scope. They can become humorless or defensive whenever challenged, refusing to entertain a bigger picture. They have low stress tolerance. Stress overwhelms them easily, and they often cope by distorting or ignoring reality. Rather than admitting faults, they find solace in blaming others. If they become upset, they expect immediate appeasement. Emotions flood them, and they look for a quick escape, whether through rage, substances, or avoidance of the problem. They do what feels best. Where a mature person might consider possible outcomes, an emotionally immature person tends to act on impulse, chasing momentary ease. If a situation grows difficult, they may suddenly vanish, akin to a warrior fleeing the battlefield instead of facing the necessary fight. In a moment of stress, they choose flight over resolution. They are subjective, not objective. An emotionally immature person tends to filter everything through how it makes them feel. Facts or logic often fall on deaf ears if they do not align with the person's current emotional stance. This self-centric approach discourages any balanced discussion because the individual prioritizes comfort over truth. They have little respect for differences. They are typically annoyed or threatened by ideas that conflict with their own. Individuals with strong emotional maturity accept that people can see the world in unique ways. But the immature mind feels unsettled by disagreement and may lash out or shut down,
rather than engaging with an opposing viewpoint. They are egocentric. Children naturally see themselves as the center of the world because they are still learning how others operate. Yet, emotionally immature adults, though they have grown older, remain stuck in a self-referential posture. This self-focus is driven more by anxiety and insecurity than childlike wonder. They often shield a shaky sense of self behind defenses, rarely acknowledging deeper flaws or vulnerabilities. They are self-preoccupied and self-involved. Such individuals are always monitoring whether their own needs are being met. If they sense dissatisfaction, they shift blame outward. This can overshadow any concern for how others feel. If a parent places themselves at the center of the family's attention, the child's feelings are consistently crowded out. They are self-referential, not self-reflective. They see everything through the lens of themselves, yet rarely dive inward to examine their own motives. In conversation, they steer topics back to their experiences without showing curiosity about the person they are speaking to. Should you speak of your struggles, they might respond by telling a story about themselves instead of truly listening. Above all, they rarely accept responsibility for harm they cause, insisting instead on their harmless intentions. They like to be the center of attention. In any gathering, an emotionally immature person's strong reactions tend to seize the spotlight. Everyone else is nudged to cater to their outbursts or anxieties. If other voices try to redirect the focus, these attempts often feel abrupt or intrusive. Many choose to yield for the sake of peace. Note that some individuals speak constantly out of genuine warmth, but here the difference is that they welcome other voices. The immature parent is not seeking a dialogue. They want the stage. They promote role reversal. A hallmark sign of emotional immaturity is how readily these parents expect their children to meet their own emotional needs. Rather than offering guidance, they lean on their child like a confidant, exposing the child to adult burdens far too early. Or, they might demand approval and praise as though the child were there to reassure them. A total reversal of what a parent-child bond should be. Frida's story. Frida grew up in a household ruled by her father, Martin, who lashed out physically and verbally. While boasting a respectable image in public, he showed little empathy at home. He alternated between anger and generosity, expecting his children to cater to his moods as though he were the child. Even after she moved away, Frida faced Martin's habit of barging into her life, expecting admiration for gestures he considered grand, even though they disregarded her preferences. Realizing she was not obligated to continue playing the grateful caretaker, Frida liberated herself from a role that was never truly hers. They have low empathy and are emotionally insensitive. Above all, emotional immaturity is marked by a lack of genuine empathy. To connect at a deep level, one must see beyond oneself and imagine another's experience. Those who fear honest feelings, from their own or anyone else, fail to offer such resonance. Instead, they might read others' emotions simply to manipulate or deflect, never to understand or comfort. Why there are so many emotionally immature parents. Countless clients have told me stories hinting at these issues. Through their histories, I have often found that these parents themselves suffered from neglect or hardship in childhood. Passed down through generations, rigid or abusive home environments taught them that open feeling was risky. In such families, love was gauged in terms of physical needs met, food, shelter, discipline, while emotional warmth was rarely addressed.
Many were told, "You must not cry," or "Obedience is everything." The result was a deep-seated limitation in recognizing or processing genuine emotion. Ellie's story. Ellie's mother, Trudy, was known for her charity around the neighborhood, yet lacked sympathy for her daughter's feelings. She would abruptly dispose of Ellie's beloved items, her cat, her comforting stuffed toy, viewing them as unimportant next to the more pressing tasks of the household. Trudy grew up in an era when children's emotional attachments carried little weight. Ellie knew her mother ensured she was never hungry or cold, but she came to understand that true affection was always in short supply. Sarah's story. Sarah recalled her mother as polite, almost distant, standing just beyond emotional reach. Once Sarah noticed her mother quietly watching her sleep in a moment that felt close and comforting. But as soon as Sarah awoke, that fleeting warmth vanished behind a polite wall. Fearful of deeper connection, her mother retreated to the role her upbringing prescribed. Deeper effects of being emotionally shut down. Those who experience such childhoods can carry forward an arrested capacity for emotional expression. They shape themselves to fit what their families deemed acceptable, often cutting off vital pieces of their own personalities. Lacking a strong sense of self, they struggle to share real closeness with anyone else. Defensiveness becomes their armor, preventing them from developing genuine warmth in their adult roles. They are often inconsistent and contradictory. Emotionally immature individuals are like puzzle pieces forced together incorrectly in childhood. Their behaviors are inconsistent, leaving their children braced for the next random swing of mood. Oddly, this unpredictability can keep a child hoping for a good moment. Since affection does occasionally appear, the child clings to the possibility of earning it, even though it comes sporadically. Elizabeth's story. Elizabeth grew up with a mother who could be attentive one day and dismissive the next. The kindness was so fleeting that Elizabeth became hypervigilant, always trying to read her mother's mood in hopes of catching those brief flashes of warmth. If her mother seemed distant, Elizabeth wondered what she had done wrong. That roller coaster taught her to see herself as inherently at fault, never sure of her own worth. They develop strong defenses that take the place of the self. Rather than growing a cohesive sense of identity, emotionally immature parents often rely on defensive habits that smother their true selves. Children sometimes cling to the idea that there is a real, loving parent buried beneath the defensiveness, if only they could reach them. But these defenses are not temporary. They have become the backbone of who the parent is. Without a willingness to reflect, little chance remains for real change. If introspection is not in their nature, they see no reason to alter how they operate. Hannah's story. Hannah tried to spark a meaningful conversation with her mother, just once. She gently asked her mother to share something personal, some story or emotion she had never revealed. Her mother, startled by the request, dissolved into tears, unable to form a single sentence. Hannah realized her mother's protective layers had never allowed her to explore or express genuine vulnerability, and the sudden invitation to do so overwhelmed her completely. Incomplete development leads to emotional limitations. Although prone to outbursts, emotionally immature parents dread a genuine, heartfelt encounter. They run from their deeper feelings because they never learned to trust them. A child raised in a home that discouraged emotion quickly comes to associate vulnerability with danger. That fear persists into adulthood, prompting them to keep emotions superficial, excitable perhaps, but never truly raw or introspective. They fear feelings. Some parents learned early on that emotions were shameful or punishable. This notion is known among some therapists as affect phobia. For example, if a parent screams or punishes a child for crying, the child may develop terror of showing sadness or even joy. This limits them severely, preventing them from ever exploring the healthy spectrum of human feeling. They focus on the physical instead of the emotional. Emotionally immature parents might do well in all material aspects, providing a comfortable home, healthy meals, or good schooling. They might dote on a sick child, possibly because this tangible caretaking feels natural and justifiable. Yet the moment real feelings come up, these parents withdraw. Children then grow confused because it seems the parent is indeed loving when it involves physical support. But that same warmth rarely extends to emotional needs. They can be killjoys. Because they are unsettled by unbridled emotion, they may dampen a child's excitement or optimism. With a roll of the eyes or a dismissive remark, they undermine joyful moments, steering everything back to a subdued, safer tone. In doing so, they rob their children of the simple pleasure of unguarded enthusiasm. They have intense but shallow emotions. It is not that these parents never display feeling. Some can be extremely demonstrative, but their displays tend to be sudden, dramatic bursts that skim the surface rather than sinking deep. An emotionally mature person might quietly weep or contemplate, showing layered complexity. The immature parent, however, flares up and then cools off just as quickly, leaving others confused or exhausted. They don't experience mixed emotions. Growing into full adulthood often means recognizing that one can love and resent someone at the same time, or feel both joy and sorrow for different aspects of a situation. Emotionally immature parents rarely blend feelings. They remain stuck in a black and white approach, leaping from one strong sentiment to another without integrating the complexity of life. Differences in quality of thought. Likewise, these parents often show a limited style of thinking. Some become rigid literalists, uninterested in exploring abstract ideas or complex concepts. Others fixate on certain intellectual hobbies, talking at length about those interests without truly engaging the person they are speaking to. The unifying theme is an inability to blend nuanced thinking with genuine emotional introspection. Difficulties with conceptual thinking. During adolescence, we typically begin to form more analytical, abstract reasoning. Yet if a child is plagued by fear and taught to stifle original thought, they may never gain confidence in that part of the mind. They remain prone to oversimplifying. Highly charged topics can make them shut down or grasp at black and white stances. Proneness to literal thinking. A parent in this category might focus on life's superficial details, such as weather reports or everyday chores, avoiding deeper discussions that risk vulnerability. This can make conversations dull or frustrating. Their child, craving substance, feels ignored or stifled. Intellectualizing obsessively. Some parents over-intellectualize, throwing themselves wholeheartedly into complex topics, but only in a detached, theoretical way. They avoid emotional closeness by staying in the realm of data or controversy, keeping genuine human connection at bay. It is a subtle barrier, but no less effective than literal-mindedness at stalling meaningful exchange. Summary. All these traits spring from a single root: lack of emotional development. When parents grow up in families that punish, ignore, or restrict emotional expression, they build defenses rather than identities. They learn to think in black and white terms, shy away from insight, and discourage closeness. Understanding these issues can liberate you from internalized guilt. If your parents showed these traits, it was less a matter of your failings than their own immaturity. In the next chapter, we will explore what it is like to interact with such parents and the challenges in communicating your needs to someone who resists emotional closeness. With clarity about their limitations, you can begin finding healthier ways to navigate, or even redefine, the bond you share. Chapter 3. How it feels to have a relationship with an emotionally immature parent. I have watched the bond between parent and child become a source of deep loneliness when that parent lacks the capacity for genuine emotional maturity. Even when you sense your mother or father has good intentions, you might still feel invisible or unheard. In these pages, we will look closer at how emotionally immature parents behave in ways that make it nearly impossible for their children to find comfort or understanding. From birth, we are instinctively tied to our parents, longing for them to reassure us when we hurt or feel lost. But if a parent's own immaturity overshadows your emotional needs, you end up turning to someone who cannot truly be there for you. That is the core of the frustration that so many of us, even as adults, carry in our hearts. Exercise: assessing your childhood difficulties with an emotionally immature parent. If you suspect your father or mother showed signs of emotional immaturity, consider the following experiences. Check each one that rings true to your early memories. You rarely had your parents' full attention. You felt they hardly listened. Your parents' mood set the tone for everyone in the household. They showed little sensitivity to your feelings or inner life. You felt you should instinctively know what they wanted, without being told. No matter how hard you tried, you could never please them enough. You worked harder to understand them than they did to understand you. Honest communication felt nearly impossible. Your parent clung to rigid ideas of how each person in the family should behave. They intruded on your privacy or personal space without regard. They made you feel too sensitive or overly emotional if you reacted to their behavior. They openly favored one child over another. They simply stopped paying attention if they disliked what you were saying. Guilt, shame, or a sense of being bad seemed to hover around you. Apologies were rare. They seldom tried to fix things when there was conflict. You often felt anger toward them that you had to keep bottled up. Any number of these can point to a parent whose immaturity prevented them from truly tuning into their child. If it feels like your own story, know that you are not alone. And these feelings did not arise from nowhere. Communication is difficult or impossible. One of the clearest signs of an emotionally immature parent is how hard it is to speak openly and find yourself truly heard. You may have spent years seeking some validating response, only to leave each conversation feeling dismissed. It might baffle you how one-sided things can feel. Like a small child, such a parent wants total attention, but gives little back in return. Some, like Brenda, realize that not only is their parent uninterested in what they think or feel, but the parent also seems to view them as a personal errand runner. Despite Brenda's mother being in her 80s, she still demanded to be the center of everyone's universe, never pausing to show curiosity or warmth toward Brenda's life. When days with her mother ended, Brenda felt both saddened and furious at the same time. They provoke anger. We might wonder why we feel so angry at such parents. If they are old or frail, shouldn't we be patient? Yet anger is often our natural response to being ignored or emotionally abandoned. We might not see our parent physically walk away from us, but the effect of their emotional disregard is just as real. We feel that sting of separation in our hearts, leading to frustration or even rage. Some children turn their anger inward, blaming themselves instead of the parent. They grow depressed or critical of themselves, shouldering the weight of unspoken resentment. Others might channel that hurt in passive-aggressive ways, forgetting, lying, or dragging their feet, rather than confronting a parent who has never acknowledged their real needs. They communicate by emotional contagion. A parent with little emotional insight often broadcasts their distress without explaining it, expecting everyone else to fix the problem or soothe them. Think of a crying infant. When something's wrong, the baby fusses or weeps, and those around it scramble to find a solution. An emotionally immature parent can behave similarly, offloading their upset onto family members who feel compelled to calm them down. Unfortunately, because such a parent does not reflect on their own actions, they repeat this cycle endlessly, leaving those around them confused or drained. They don't do emotional work. A child, even when grown, might yearn for a parent who is willing to hear and empathize. But emotionally immature parents avoid deep conversations or apologies, often responding with, "You should have told me," or "I'm not a mind reader." The truth is, empathizing takes effort, and they are not prepared to invest that energy. They may see no reason to be considerate of your feelings if you do not spell them out in explicit detail. If they are called out for this, they might dismiss the situation by labeling you as overly sensitive, thus sidestepping responsibility for emotional labor. They are hard to give to you. Might imagine that going out of your way to support an immature parent would earn some gratitude. But these parents resist genuine closeness, becoming irritable or rejecting help. They seem to want sympathy while also turning away anyone who tries to provide it. They often expect others to intuit exactly what they need without ever saying so. It becomes a guessing game, one you can never truly win, leading to more frustration and confusion. They resist repairing relationships. When there is conflict, most of us believe in trying to mend rifts with honesty or an apology. But the emotionally immature parent wants swift, simple forgiveness, as though the matter never happened. They become angry if you still feel hurt and accuse you of dwelling on the past. They act shocked that you cannot just get over it. For them, confrontation is unnerving because it threatens the fragile image they hold of themselves as always in the right. They demand mirroring. Healthy parents reflect a child's feelings, helping the child feel recognized and understood. Immature parents reverse that, expecting the child to follow and mirror them. These parents often believe children will validate their self-worth by always agreeing or remaining dependent. When children begin to show individuality, by traveling, having different opinions, or stepping out of a comfort zone, it stirs the parents' anxiety, leading them to guilt trip, shame, or threaten rejection. Cynthia's story. Cynthia's mother, Stella, demanded total obedience, cutting off financial support if Cynthia ever wanted to do something Stella disapproved of, such as travel. Stella's message was clear. As long as you live exactly as I do, we will get along fine. Cynthia, to her credit, chose to follow her own path, even though it meant her mother disowned her for a while. Yet the cost was ongoing fear that any time she showed her true self, she risked losing relationships altogether. Their self-esteem rides on your compliance. Since such parents worry about their own worth, they panic if they feel unable to control a child's thoughts or behavior. This is why they can lash out at a child who is simply struggling to grasp a concept, like Jeff's father, who belittled him during homework. In truth, the father was terrified of being a poor teacher and responded by blaming Jeff. This dynamic often repeats in adulthood when a parent's sense of security depends on everyone catering to them. They see roles as sacred. Emotionally immature people prefer strict roles, as it spares them from navigating the complexity of genuine human connection. As parents, they feel you must always obey them or endure invasive behavior, because I'm your mother, or I'm your father. Challenging that idea makes them defensive or outraged. They might claim that simply being your parent grants them unchecked authority or a pass to overstep normal boundaries. Role entitlement. Role entitlement means believing you should treat them however they wish, solely due to their role. A father might insist he can barge into your house at any time because he is dad. A mother who works as a realtor might rearrange your furniture without permission, convinced that her two roles, parent and professional, override your preferences. Role coercion. Role coercion happens when parents demand you live as they see fit, no matter the cost to your well-being. They might shame or threaten rejection if you step outside the part they assigned you. Jillian's story is painful testimony to this. Though her husband was abusive, her mother pushed her to remain married, oblivious to the danger it posed. Or consider Mason's mother, who dismissed his admission that he might be gay by saying he might as well claim to be a zebra. The child's own truths are denied in favor of a rigid parental script. They seek enmeshment, not emotional intimacy. Despite appearances, these parents often crave enmeshment, melding with someone who reassures them, rather than fostering true mutual closeness. True intimacy honors each person's individuality, while enmeshment thrives on blurred boundaries and rigid roles. A parent might prefer one sibling over others, not due to deeper connection, but because that child more readily agrees with them or remains dependent. Playing favorites. Emotional immaturity can show up as favoring a particular child, like Heather's mother, who happily gushed over Heather's sister but never shared such conversations with Heather. Or Mark's father, who pampered Mark's younger brother while imposing harsher discipline on Mark simply because Mark's independence did not fit his father's desire for a needy child. When parents play favorites, it is usually because they can more easily merge with one sibling, not because that sibling is more deserving of love. Finding substitute family members. Some immature parents extend their need for enmeshment outside the immediate family. If their own children are grown or not dependent enough, they may focus on someone else they can rescue or fuse with, a neighbor, friend, or church member. By lavishing attention on this new person, they satisfy the craving for someone who needs them, thereby avoiding genuine self-reflection. They have an inconsistent sense of time. One subtle but significant trait of an emotionally immature parent is their patchy sense of past and future. They live in a series of disconnected nows, which helps them ignore consequences or inconsistencies. If they made a promise yesterday, that does not stop them from going back on it today. They fail to see life as a continuous thread of cause and effect. Why a poor sense of time can look like emotional manipulation. It may seem like manipulation, but often they are simply grabbing for whatever short-term advantage they can in that moment, never considering the broader fallout. Deceit or broken promises might serve them now, so they act impulsively, without reflecting on the damage to trust this behavior causes down the road. How lacking a sense of time's continuity creates inconsistency. Because they do not connect yesterday's words with today's, emotionally immature parents can appear to contradict themselves without shame or regret. They might pretend they never said something, brush off concerns about the future, or get indignant that you are stuck on the past. They live in perpetual denial that a relationship's past experiences hold weight, or that the future demands any preparation. How an immature sense of time limits self-reflection and accountability. Confronted with a past mistake, such a parent may recoil, unable to acknowledge any fault. With little sense that time flows forward, they dismiss any reference to old wounds as a pointless fixation. This prevents genuine apologies or effort to rebuild trust. Once the difficult moment is over, it is as if it never happened. For a child trying to heal or reach deeper understanding, it can be like trying to nail water to the wall. Summary: life with an emotionally immature parent involves a host of confounding behaviors, from shallow communication and rigid roles to favoritism and fleeting promises. Their sense of self is so underdeveloped that they cannot handle complex emotions or consistent accountability. Rather than working to repair broken trust, they often demand immediate forgiveness or ignore the issue altogether. By shining light on these patterns, you no longer have to question your own sanity or worth. Understanding reveals that such behaviors stem from the parent's undeveloped capacity to relate, not from any failing in you. The next step is to look at how these traits may have taken shape in your parent, and how you can begin to find a path toward genuine self-care and freedom. Chapter 4. 4. Types of emotionally immature parents. I have seen many faces of parental immaturity in my time, each leaving children uncertain of their own worth. Although there are many ways that a parent might fail to nurture a child, 4 common patterns keep surfacing time and again. Each of these stems from a shared core of self-centeredness and limited empathy, but they color family life in distinct ways. Before looking closely at these 4 types, I want to note that every variation results in emotional insecurity for the child. No matter which style you grew up under, you were likely left with a sense that your emotions mattered little in the eyes of the very people meant to protect and guide you. How different types of parenting affect infant attachment. Much research shows that a child's earliest experiences hinge on a caregiver's sensitivity. When a mother is attuned, able to sense her baby's cues and consistently respond, her child gains a secure foundation from which to explore the world. Conversely, parents with low empathy and high self-involvement lead children to develop anxiety and uncertainty, instead of gradually learning that their cries and joys will be recognized. These children discover their feelings are irrelevant or even unwelcome. The 4 types of emotionally immature parents. Even though each type has its own style, they all share shallow or inconsistent empathy, self-focus, and a tendency to use their children for emotional support, resistance to true closeness, with no genuine interest in the child's unique experiences, difficulty regulating themselves, so that when tension builds, they offload it onto the child. In short, they neglect or distort a child's emotional needs rather than listening and adapting to them. 1. The emotional parent. The emotional parent is ruled by overwhelming feelings. Small upsets grow into crises, and chaos hangs in the air. Because they are easily unbalanced, everyone around them must constantly work to soothe or placate them. Children learn early on that their own feelings take a back seat to the parent's storms of emotion. Instability and unpredictability. One moment they might be affectionate, the next they're angry or in tears. Intense mood swings. Family members tiptoe around, fearing any small thing might trigger an outburst. Victim mindset. They tend to see themselves as helpless, expecting others, often their own child, to rescue them from anxiety or sadness. Although the severity can vary, children of emotional parents learn to anticipate blow-ups and do whatever it takes to keep the peace. It's no surprise they become hyper-attuned to others' moods, often ignoring their own needs in the process. Brittany's story. Brittany's mother, Shonda, intruded relentlessly on her life, framing her behavior as worry. If Brittany was ill for a few days, Shonda pelted her with calls and visits, disregarding Brittany's pleas for space. When confronted, Shonda felt wounded and escalated emotionally, as if Brittany's normal boundaries were an attack on her. In reality, Shonda was fixated on soothing her own anxiety, never stopping to consider Brittany's requests. 2. The driven parent. The driven parent is always in motion, planning, fixing, and perfecting. At first glance, they seem dedicated to their children's welfare, but beneath that busy veneer lies a failure to genuinely empathize. Their children often feel like pieces in a grand plan, never asked what they personally want. Goal-obsessed, they push children relentlessly, comparing them to a standard they themselves define. Rigid expectations. They see the child's achievements, or lack thereof, as a reflection of their own success. Constant evaluation. This parent's watchful eye leaves the child feeling judged, never free to explore life on their own terms. Though they may love their children, these parents struggle to accept that kids need unconditional care and room to discover their own passions. As a result, children lose confidence in themselves and fear disappointing their controlling parent. John's story. John's parents showered him with instructions and deadlines, curbing any sense of independence. While they proclaimed it was for his future success, John felt so evaluated he never dared to form his own goals. Just sharing an idea spurred a torrent of helpful advice, undermining his ability to choose. Christine's story. Christine's father believed that success could be commanded. He dropped her into a pool to teach her to swim, telling her to figure it out. Throughout her childhood, he barked orders, never offering genuine guidance or considering her fears. Christine became a successful attorney, but lived with deep-seated insecurity, still braced for that next impossible demand. 3. The passive parent. The passive parent often comes across as relaxed or kind. They may even show moments of gentle fun that the other types lack. But when troubles arise, they withdraw, leaving their children unsupported at crucial times. Conflict avoidant. Instead of intervening or setting boundaries, they shrug off problems, hoping they'll go away. Reluctant to protect. They seldom challenge a more forceful spouse, sometimes allowing emotional or physical mistreatment in the home. Inconsistent attention. In quieter moments, they can be affectionate, but they vanish at the first sign of tension. Children often idolize the passive parent because they aren't as harsh or demanding as the other parent. Yet this favoritism can hide a painful truth. Passive parents fail to fulfill the child's deeper needs for protection and guidance. Molly's story. Molly treasured her father's gentle humor, but he never intervened when Molly's mother erupted in abuse. He'd stay in the garage or pretend it wasn't happening. Molly learned to focus on the small comforts he offered, like banging pots to signal he was still there, and never questioned why he didn't actually stop the beatings. As an adult, She realized that she had been left to fend for herself when she needed a parent's shield the most. 4. The rejecting parent. The rejecting parent makes it clear they'd rather be left alone. Emotionally closed off, they give children no sense of warmth or welcome. Any attempt at closeness often ends with ridicule or punishment. Withholding. They cannot tolerate the child's needs and show no interest in meaningful conversation or emotional support. Irritable or harsh. They quickly dismiss their child, sometimes using angry outbursts to enforce distance. Scornful of vulnerability. They see signs of attachment or emotional expression as weaknesses and respond with coldness. Growing up under a rejecting parent often means feeling like you're a bother simply for existing. Such children may learn to keep quiet, never advocating for themselves. As adults, they may struggle to ask for help or express needs for fear of inciting contempt. Beth's story. Beth's mother, Rosa, conveyed annoyance at every visit. She deflected Beth's attempts at conversation, criticized her appearance, and found excuses to end phone calls quickly. Beth grew up feeling her mother wished she would simply go away. If Beth sought closeness, Rosa belittled her as too needy, showing little interest in even the simplest moments of sharing. Exercise. Determining your parent's type. Use the following checklists to explore which type best matches your own parent. You may notice traits from more than one category, as these styles can overlap under stress. All 4 share the broader signs of self-focus, poor empathy, lack of genuine communication, and avoidance of true emotional intimacy. Emotional parent. Overreacts to minor irritations, pushing others to manage their distress. Uses outbursts or tears to control the family's focus. Equates life's ups and downs to personal abandonment or betrayal. Driven parent turns every situation into a project, asserting they know best. Monitors the child constantly, pushing for continuous improvement. Acts like a fixer, with no regard for the child's actual desires. Passive parent evades conflict, preferring denial or wishful thinking. Enjoys playfulness or mild companionship, but withdraws when trouble looms. Fails to provide protection or stand up for the child against stronger personalities. Rejecting parent. Barely engages. Treats the child as an annoyance. May react with anger if the child seeks attention, especially for emotional issues. Conveys an overall sense of, go away, don't bother me. Summary. No matter which category fits your mother or father, the result is a child left feeling unseen. An emotional parent's drama might devour all the attention in a home. A driven parent's relentless quests may overshadow their children's individual needs. A passive parent will offer scant shelter from conflict, and a rejecting parent can make a child question why they even exist. However, these categories are not your destiny. Understanding them is a step toward freeing yourself from old confusion and guilt. Each of these styles stems from the parent's own struggle with empathizing and self-regulation, not from a lack of worth in you. As we move forward, we will explore how children raised by any of these 4 types often adopt one of 2 main coping styles, internalizing or externalizing, and how you can begin to reclaim your right to a life defined by your own values and desires. Chapter 5. How different children react to emotionally immature parenting. There are times when a child's deepest needs go unmet. A father or mother, consumed by their own struggles, fails to offer the steady warmth and understanding that a young soul yearns for. In such moments, a child must find ways to endure. Many cling to a quiet hope that one day their pain might be soothed and their longing healed. Allow me, in the voice of one who has walked many paths, to share how these children learn to survive and adapt, even when a parent's heart remains closed. The first glimmer of survival springs from a child's ability to dream up a hopeful future, what I would call a healing fantasy. This fantasy is a promise to themselves. If they can only change enough, or if the world around them shifts in just the right way, they'll finally know the security they crave. In time, they also develop a role self, a temporary identity meant to catch a bit of attention from the parent who hasn't shown them enough warmth. Whether that role self is a dutiful caretaker, an overachiever, or even someone who acts out in frustration, it stands in for the child's true self, which never truly disappears, but often goes unseen beneath the demands of family life. The origins of healing fantasies. When children sense that their parents cannot, or will not, offer them genuine closeness, they find ways to carry on. It's natural for them to believe that if they just try hard enough, be good, please everyone, stand out, or else become powerful, then someday they'll feel the love that has been missing. Perhaps they imagine that finding the perfect partner or achieving extraordinary success will mend the old wounds. This is the spark of the healing fantasy. It shelters a child's heart with the promise of a better tomorrow, giving them a reason to keep going. As people grow up, these fantasies linger, quietly shaping their adult relationships. They might push themselves to the brink, believing they must earn affection by sacrificing everything, or they might try to force others to fill the old void left by an emotionally absent parent. Often they resent the people who can't seem to make their pain disappear. It can become a cycle of frustration. Yet it all started with the innocent dream that they could mend what once felt so broken. Developing a role self. Much like a soldier who slips into armor to face an enemy, a child puts on a role self to win the scraps of care a parent might offer. Instead of revealing the tender core of who they really are, they become the helpful one, the troublemaker, the achiever, or the peacemaker, anything that might secure a place within the family's fraught dynamics. The trouble with a role self is that it isn't the child's authentic nature. It's a crafted mask intended to draw attention or approval. Worn too long, this mask can weigh heavily. The true self remains buried, its voice quieted by the fear that revealing it might bring rejection or indifference. And so, year after year, a child grows into a person who does not fully recognize the sound of their own heart. They live by the rules demanded by the family, seeking to please or appease rather than risking genuine self-expression. Exercise. Identifying your healing fantasy and role self. 1. On a sheet labeled Healing Fantasy, finish these phrases in a way that feels honest. I wish other people were more __. It's hard for me to understand why people can't simply __. One day, I hope someone will finally treat me like __. If I had the right person by my side, they would __. In a kinder world, people would __. 2. On a second sheet titled Role Self, finish these. I try so hard to be __. People like me best when I __. Others don't seem to appreciate how much I __. I always end up being the one who __. I've spent years trying to be the kind of person who __. When you've completed both pages, look at what your answers reveal about the secret wishes you carry, your healing fantasy, and the mask you wear, your role self. Ask yourself whether continuing these old scripts serves you, or if you're ready to set them aside and let more of your true self shine through. 2. Styles of coping with emotionally immature parents. In a home where parents are lost in their own needs, children typically adapt in one of two ways. They internalize their struggles, believing that by working harder from within, they can fix what's wrong, or they externalize their problems, expecting others to solve them. Some of us do a bit of both, but most lean more heavily toward one style. Internalizers. Internalizers are those who turn inward, sifting through their thoughts and feelings with care. They reflect deeply, often blaming themselves for difficulties. If they sense something's amiss, they try to become more helpful, more disciplined, or more perfect, hoping this will restore harmony. They might feel guilty when they see others upset, assuming they should have done more. The downside is that they sacrifice too much. wearing themselves thin in the quest to prove their worth. On the bright side, when they do step into the world as their true selves, their empathy and insight can become a wellspring of genuine connection. Externalizers. Externalizers, on the other hand, rush to find solutions by changing the environment or people around them. They may react impulsively, lashing out or blaming others. They rarely pause for introspection, believing if only the world would cooperate, they'd be happy. This mindset can foster conflict as they pin their hopes on external fixes, partners, family members, or even substances that might dull their discomfort. Often they create more chaos, further alienating those they desperately wish would rescue them. This difference in coping can drive a wedge between siblings. An impulsive, externalizing child might wreak havoc, while a more compliant sibling, the internalizer, watches helplessly, receiving little parental support. Indeed, the externalizing child's dramatic actions may command all the attention, both negative and positive, leaving the quieter child feeling overlooked and lonely. Externalizers on a continuum. Not everyone who externalizes becomes abusive or destructive. Some may simply harbor the belief that others owe them the changes they seek. A mild externalizer might appear cooperative, but secretly thinks, "I'd be fine if everyone around me would just shape up." With patience and self-awareness, these individuals can learn to take responsibility for their own lives. Others, however, are so entrenched in blaming that they become the classic troublemaker, always stirring upheaval wherever they go. Internalizers, under stress. Even a gentle, reflective person can grow weary of giving so much and receiving so little. Some internalizers reach a breaking point. They may rebel, sabotaging long-held commitments, or indulging in behaviors that grant momentary relief, an affair, substance misuse, or sudden escapism. This isn't hypocrisy, but rather a sign that they've carried the burden alone for too long, and now they grasp at any external solution to ease the ache of feeling used or unnoticed. Exercise. Identifying your coping style. Ask yourself which set of traits feels more familiar. Externalizer. Traits. Lives in the moment, not planning for consequences. Wants others to make things right. Acts first, thinks later. Blames circumstances. Rarely self-reflects. Escapes uncomfortable realities. Internalizer. Traits. Worries about the future, often overthinking. Believes they must change themselves to fix problems. Analyzes situations deeply before acting. Feels guilt easily. Taking responsibility for issues. Finds it hard to ask for help, preferring self-sufficiency. While you might not neatly fit all traits, most of us lean one way or the other. Recognizing this can help explain why you act and feel as you do, and guide you toward healthier balance. If you see externalizing tendencies in yourself, you might practice pausing to reflect before acting. If you're an internalizer, it may be time to share the load and let others know how you truly feel. Balance is the key. Where extremes run wild, trouble follows. The externalizer who never learns self-reflection can sabotage every relationship, sapping others' strength by demanding constant rescue. The internalizer who endlessly blames themselves may collapse under anxiety or depression, forgetting they too deserve care and understanding. However, harnessing the strengths of both perspectives can lead to wise action. Those inclined toward internal reflection can learn to speak up rather than shoulder every burden alone. Those who act spontaneously can slow down enough to learn from consequences. We are each more adaptable than we realize, once we see clearly where we stand and acknowledge our hidden beliefs about how to earn love. Summary. From buried hopes of a better tomorrow to the subtle, or not so subtle, roles we adopt to secure even a crumb of attention, children cope with emotional neglect in ways that shape their entire lives. Whether they bend inward, trying to solve every problem alone, or lash outward, insisting others must change, they do so because a fundamental need went unanswered in childhood. Yet the true self, the part that longs for honest connection and freedom, never disappears. To reclaim it, We must first understand the protective armor we once forged. Then, we can consider setting it aside to stand more openly, asking for genuine understanding instead of scraps. In the chapters ahead, we will look deeper into the lives of internalizers, the thoughtful souls who so often work quietly in the background, and discover how they might step forward to claim a richer, more authentic life. Chapter 6. What it's like to be an internalizer. I have seen many tender hearts, young men and women who grew up attuned to every nuance of their parents' moods, learning early on that their feelings were not of paramount importance. Internalizers are such people. They sense subtle shifts in their families, striving to keep everyone at peace. From the viewpoint of Thors, a man who values both gentleness and honesty, it is the internalizer who often carries the weight of relationships on their shoulders, quietly overlooking their own needs. Through these pages, you will learn how being an internalizer can shape your life, making you both deeply empathetic and prone to self-neglect when faced with emotionally immature parents. Internalizers are highly sensitive and perceptive. From the start, an internalizer notices things that others might miss, slight changes in tone, fleeting expressions on someone's face. This heightened awareness can be both blessing and curse, gifting you with insight into others' feelings while also making you vulnerable to subtle hurts. Research suggests some infants are born with a more alert nervous system. As they grow, these children become what you might call emotional tuning forks, picking up on the mood of the room without a word being spoken. When an emotionally immature parent cannot offer real engagement, that child, ever perceptive, feels the hollowness acutely. Internalizers have strong emotions. An externalizing child might lash out physically or impulsively when overcome with emotion, but the internalizer holds their feelings in. This can intensify what they feel inside, sometimes prompting others to call them too sensitive or overly emotional. Since their emotions run deep, a sarcastic remark or dismissive attitude can wound them more than any punishment aimed at an externalizer's actions. This is because internalizers, by nature, blame themselves for conflicts they cannot fully understand. They might grow up believing something is innately wrong with their own feelings. Internalizers have a deep need for connection. Above all else, internalizers hunger for genuine closeness, what I might call the warmth of shared experience. They are not content with surface-level friendliness. They long for people to look into their hearts and truly see them. When an emotionally immature parent refuses to engage or offers only perfunctory nods, this child experiences profound loneliness. Some even become good little helpers, believing that if they prove their worth by sacrificing their own needs, their parent might finally bestow genuine attention. But love earned through constant giving is a heavy load to bear, and rarely does it heal that original wound of being unseen. Logan's story. Logan, a successful musician, craved understanding from her family. They prided themselves on togetherness, yet she felt as if she were on fire with unaddressed pain, while they remained oblivious. Every attempt to connect was met with blank faces, no real discussion of emotions. Her family's self-preoccupation left her riddled with doubts about her own sanity. Am I crazy for wanting more closeness? Logan's plight captures the essence of the internalizer's struggle, yearning for authentic connection, yet left unfulfilled by those who can't or won't meet them halfway. Internalizers have strong instincts for genuine engagement. Why does isolation sting so badly? We humans are wired, like other mammals, to find comfort in closeness. Neuroscientists have shown that we possess an instinct to reach out under stress rather than simply fighting, fleeing, or freezing. This capacity for bonding is vital. It helps conserve energy and build trusting alliances. For the internalizer, this instinct is especially pronounced. They can sense when someone they love is shut off emotionally. It feels like a limb has gone numb, spurring them to try harder to connect. If the parent stays distant,
the internalizer grows anxious and confused, often blaming themselves for a failure that isn't theirs. Internalizers are apologetic about needing help. One revealing habit of internalizers: they apologize for having needs. Having been dismissed or criticized during childhood, they learn to feel embarrassed about seeking help, even in therapy, where emotional honesty is welcomed. You might find an internalizer saying, "Sorry for crying," or "I shouldn't complain. Others have it worse." This underscores a core belief that they are undeserving of attention, a belief rooted in a childhood where their needs were overshadowed by others. Internalizers become invisible and easy to neglect. Because they rely on their inner resources rather than causing a stir, internalizers might fade into the background. Parents preoccupied with more outwardly troubled siblings can overlook the quiet one who seems fine. These children often feel an acute aloneness, profoundly needing care, yet never receiving it because they do not demand it, getting by on limited recognition. In adulthood, many internalizers discover they have been surviving on small scraps of acknowledgement. A single kind word can flood them with gratitude, even though they've been doing the emotional heavy lifting, sometimes for years, without complaint. Recognizing childhood neglect. Often, internalizers don't realize that what they experienced was genuine neglect. They recall being left to fend for themselves emotionally or physically, and they assume such independence was normal. Not until they reflect in therapy or supportive environments do they see that they had long ago been forced to handle challenges no child should face alone. Sandra's story. At 11, Sandra was put on a bus to travel overnight with her 7-year-old brother. Frightened as she was, Sandra's focus was on calming her sibling and ensuring both made it safely. She was effectively cast in the parent's role, an immense responsibility that overshadowed her own fears. Internalizers don't see abuse for what it is. Because they naturally look inward for the cause of conflict, internalizers can rationalize or minimize abuse. If a parent screamed or used physical force, the child might blame themselves. "If I hadn't been so clumsy," or "if I weren't so sensitive." They carry this pattern into adult relationships, sometimes overlooking abusive behavior because they never learn to label mistreatment accurately. Internalizers do most of the emotional work in relationships. From childhood, they've been the ones tuned to others' emotions, stepping in to keep things harmonious. In families with parents who avoid emotional labor, the internalizer often becomes an emotional caretaker. They might lighten a tense atmosphere with humor or sympathy, bearing the burden of making everyone feel okay while stifling their own needs. Candace's story. Candace spent years as her mother's confidant, offering reassurance that her mother was lovable. Though Candace noticed her mother never truly listened to her troubles, she felt it was her duty to remain the comforting presence. Like many internalizers, she grew adept at giving far more in relationships than she ever received. Overworking in adult relationships. The pattern continues beyond childhood. Internalizers can fall into one-sided marriages or friendships, pushing themselves to supply all the warmth. They often believe they can fix someone else's unhappiness by being extra loving, extra patient, mirroring that childhood wish to finally earn a parent's devotion. Needy externalizers are drawn to this dynamic, sensing the internalizer's capacity for sympathy. They offer initial flattery, then revert to demanding behavior, pulling back once they feel secure in the relationship. The internalizer, used to chasing approval, tries even harder, not realizing they are draining themselves. Attracting needy people. Caregiving skills can be a superpower, yet lacking boundaries can attract people who exploit kindness. It's essential for internalizers to recognize that they aren't obligated to rescue everyone they meet. Letting go of that role doesn't make them callous. It frees them to focus on where their empathy can truly flourish. Believing that self-neglect will bring love. Growing up, serving another's needs fosters a subconscious belief that virtue lies in sacrificing oneself. In some families, religious or cultural principles reinforce the idea that self-care is selfish.
This can lead children to become adults who ignore their exhaustion, concluding that if they just give more or try harder, they will eventually feel valued. Unfortunately, the only reward for such extremes of self-sacrifice is deeper exhaustion and grief. The child's healing fantasy, if I do everything right, they'll finally notice me, remains unrealized because the other person was never able to reciprocate from the start. Summary internalizers, with their keen sensitivity and longing for true connection, often struggle the most under emotionally immature parenting. They become the quiet guardians of family harmony, hiding pain behind an aura of competency and kindness. Yet this very trait can lead them to overfunction in relationships, draining their inner resources. Knowing you are an internalizer is the first step toward recognizing the automatic burdens you shoulder. You need not apologize for wanting closeness or for having feelings. There is no shame in seeking help or setting boundaries to preserve your own well-being. In time, you can learn that authentic connection thrives when both people take responsibility for their own emotional part, rather than leaving all the work in your patient, caring hands. Chapter 7. Breaking Down and Awakening. I have walked many roads, some of them harsh, yet I have also learned that times of deep confusion or sorrow can bring us closer to our true nature. Often, to break free of old ways of surviving, childhood patterns and dreams that no longer serve us, we must first unravel. It is in that unraveling, that moment when the role we have worn for so long finally falters, that we awaken to the core of who we truly are. What is the true self? From ages past, we humans have sensed an inner spark, a deeper self that speaks plainly and knows what we truly need. You might call it the soul, your core being, or simply the part of you that remains when all pretenses fall away. This true self shows itself through gut feelings, intuition, and that sense of rightness you feel when your actions match who you are. When you let the true self guide you, problems seem clearer and your path less clogged by hesitation. You may discover others responding to you with greater warmth, as if they too sense that unwavering authenticity. What does the true self want? Above all else, your true self wants to expand, as a child grows strong when given space and acceptance. It wishes you to be honest with yourself, free of any old role you once believed you had to play. Whether that old role is the giver, the perfect student, or the peacekeeper, the true self has no interest in keeping up appearances. It only yearns for you to meet life's challenges with honesty and an unguarded heart. We often bury our true desires when we fear they won't be accepted, but your true self won't vanish. It merely waits until you are ready to hear it again. Learning to heed its voice is a powerful act, for it reclaims your right to be authentically you. Exercise. Awakening to your true self. Take a single sheet of paper and fold it lengthwise so you have two halves. Label one side, my true self, and the other, my role self. Begin with the true self side. 1. Recall yourself as a young child, before the 4th grade, if possible. What did you most enjoy doing? Long before anyone told you it wasn't sensible or worthwhile. 2. Who were the people you trusted or admired? What were their qualities? 3. Imagine you had no worries of money or obligation today. How would you spend your time? What calls to you most strongly? Write these ideas down, freely and without judgment. Then, flip to the role self side. 1. Think of who you've become in order to feel worthwhile or accepted. 2. Which of your natural interests do you suppress because they don't fit your current image? 3. Are there people in your life who exhaust you simply because you are trying to be who they want you to be? After a day or so, open the page fully and compare both sides. Ask yourself, am I living by my true self, or does my role self dominate most of my actions? Breaking down in order to wake up. When the facade we've built can no longer hide our deeper truths, we may experience a breakdown. It can look like panic, depression, insomnia, or mounting tension.
These painful symptoms are often your true self's way of urging you to abandon a worn-out story about who you must be. Though the experience might feel like losing control, in reality you are beginning to break free of limits placed on you long ago. In a sense, it is the old illusions that crumble, not your actual self. As unsettling as it feels, this can be the first step in reclaiming your innate wisdom. Emotional distress as growth. Centuries ago, philosophers and sages noticed that times of great turmoil can ultimately make a person wiser. The Polish psychiatrist Kazimierz Dabrowski called this positive disintegration, the notion that intense emotional struggle can be a sign of progress toward a stronger, more authentic self. When you face your turmoil bravely, you may well emerge with deeper clarity about what truly matters to you. Aileen's story. Aileen felt keenly that she was the only one in her family seeking therapy and self-awareness. Her relatives considered her the troubled one, dismissing her reflections as unnecessary. Reading about Dabrowski's theory, she realized that her pain was more than just suffering. It was an opportunity for growth. She began to see her journey as an act of courage, rather than a sign of weakness. Waking up from an outdated role self. Sometimes, an unexpected crisis, panic attacks, sudden overwhelm, reveals just how stifling an old role has become. You may find yourself thinking, I've lived by these rules for years, and they never brought me closer to feeling accepted or loved. Something must change. Virginia's story. Virginia's panic attack stemmed from the dread she felt whenever her overbearing brother criticized her, echoing their father's dismissive tone. Through exploration, Virginia saw how her lifelong role of scared little girl had kept her hoping for approval she might never receive. Awakening from that role allowed her to question whether her brother was truly worth such deference. By recognizing the panic as her true self's protest against playing small, she gained the power to change her perspective. Exercise. Releasing yourself from a self-defeating role. 1. Think of someone whose presence makes you feel insecure or small. 2. Write a brief description of that person's dominant traits. What qualities intimidate you? 3. Now describe how you behave around them. Are you submissive, overly apologetic, or desperate for their approval? 4. Ask yourself if there's a healing fantasy involved. Do you secretly hope that if you try hard enough, this person will value or validate you? When you see how much energy you expend, you might decide you no longer wish to perform that role. Picture treating this person as you would any stranger you respect, neither revering nor fearing them. Notice how that simple shift of viewpoint feels in your body, and whether it brings more calm or confidence. Waking up to what you really feel. Oftentimes, acknowledging your deeper feelings means confronting unwelcome truths about people you love. Perhaps you dislike a parent's personality, even as you cherish what they sacrificed for you. Or you recognize a friend's negativity drains you, though you feel you should tolerate it. Tilda's story. Tilda came from a humble background, saved by her mother's hard work. Yet when Tilda entered therapy for depression, she uncovered a hidden truth. She did not like her mother's constant bitterness and never-ending complaints. Admitting that contradiction, love and gratitude mixed with strong dislike, freed Tilda from guilt-laden depression, letting her see her mother's manipulative behaviors more clearly. She learned that acknowledging real feelings does not erase gratitude. Rather, it grants you the honesty to see a person's whole character. Exercise. Exploring whether you have hidden feelings. Next time you feel anxious, heavy, or fatigued without obvious cause, pause and consider. Is there someone or something triggering these sensations? Are you angry, scared, or simply fed up, but hesitant to admit it? Use plain language to describe it, as though you were in grade school. Simple truths can untangle complex knots. You don't have to confront anyone right away. Just practice being honest with yourself. Merely naming these feelings aloud
in private, can ease a burden you've carried alone. Waking up to anger. For many, anger is the final locked door, especially if, as children, they were scolded for showing it. Yet anger can be a signal that you're reclaiming respect for yourself. It pushes you to stop tolerating what shouldn't be tolerated. Jade's story. Jade once believed she was flawed for feeling so much anger, particularly toward her distant parents. Over time, she saw that her anger was a direct result of their lifelong neglect and her endless attempts to fix the family through kindness. Realizing that such anger was valid empowered Jade to adjust her expectations and form a more self-protective path. Waking up to better self-care. Internalizers often run themselves ragged, convinced they alone must keep everything running smoothly. Neglect of your physical and emotional well-being can escalate until your body rebels. Exhaustion, chronic pain, or stress injuries. Lena's story. From her mother's demands to never appear lazy, Lena learned to ignore her own body. Even as an adult, she habitually pushed through pain, treating rest like a sin. Recognizing this pattern allowed her to adjust her pace, granting herself permission to ease up and avoid physical burnout. Sometimes, letting go of an ingrained hustle is the key to reclaiming your health. Waking up through relationship breakdowns. Intimate relationships naturally stir old emotions. Memories of parents we wished would love us more, roles we unconsciously repeat. When a partnership unravels or hits a crisis, it can be a powerful wake-up call, revealing issues that have haunted you since childhood. Mike's story. After losing his job hours and facing a painful divorce, Mike found himself at a crossroads. Everything he had done to please others, especially his mother and wife, had led to emptiness, not acceptance. Remarkably, as he embraced this loss, he discovered relief and a sense of self rising within him. What is real success? He asked. First, you discard the very idea of it, and then see who you are as a person. Waking up from idealizing others. Many who are emotionally neglected cling to a dream that their parents or loved ones are wiser, more competent, or more caring than they truly are. It feels safer to maintain this illusion, because seeing them plainly might leave us feeling unanchored. Yet recognizing our parents' limitations can be liberating, showing us that we aren't bound to wait forever for approval that may never come. Patsy's story. Patsy was more mature than her impulsive husband and critical mother, but the thought of accepting that unsettled her. She found it disloyal to imagine surpassing them in emotional understanding. Only when she acknowledged her own strength could she stop demanding a depth from them they did not possess, allowing her to set boundaries and live more freely. Waking up to your strengths. Children of self-absorbed parents rarely learn to identify and honor their talents. You might feel uneasy thinking well of yourself, as though praising your gifts is a moral failing. But true humility does not mean denying one's virtues. Rather, it balances them with generosity. Knowing what you bring to the world fuels confidence and a sense of purpose. Waking up to a new set of values. Throughout childhood, we absorb rules that tell us what we should care about. But as adults, we can question these rules and choose our own guiding principles, discarding those that sap our vitality or contradict our true nature. Aaron's story. Aaron thought it was honorable to avoid seeking recognition, assuming that pushing himself forward would be weak or boastful. He waited quietly, hoping someone would discover his ability. Ultimately, he realized this mindset was rooted in a fantasy that authority figures would simply pluck him from the shadows. Embracing a new value, that he had the right to speak up for himself, transformed his career and sense of worth. Waking up by getting free of childhood issues. Waking up often means grappling with the emotional scars left by earlier neglect or harshness. Research shows that pain from the past doesn't doom us, unless we lock it away unexamined. Parents who learn to reflect on their own difficult upbringings can still create secure bonds with their children. It's the avoidance of reality that keeps old wounds festering. Thus,
The path to healing is not about erasing history, but about folding it into our story with honesty. Once we accept that certain wrongs occurred, we can cease living as if we must still make up for them or pretend they never happened. Summary. When your old ways of coping break down, it can feel as though you're losing everything. Yet often, you are shedding illusions that never matched your truest self. Whether your signal comes in the form of anxiety, anger, depression, or exhaustion, it is a reminder that your truest self refuses to be silenced any longer. By bravely admitting the feelings you've concealed, even the darker ones, and revisiting the values or role selves you've outgrown, you can reawaken a sense of wholeness. That awakening may be messy and disorienting, but in the end, you reclaim the precious thread of your own life story, weaving it on your own terms. Move forward, knowing these struggles testify to your courage. The next step is to use your new insight to handle the emotionally immature people around you in a healthier way, especially those whose presence still shapes your world. As you embrace a more authentic self, you'll find fresh clarity and strength to navigate what comes next. Chapter 8. How to avoid getting hooked by an emotionally immature parent. From my travels and countless encounters, I have often noticed how deeply we long for our parents' love, no matter how they treat us. The same holds true even when we suspect they do not, or cannot, truly care about our feelings. Many remain stuck waiting for that spark of recognition, hoping one day their parent might show genuine empathy. Yet if your mother or father is emotionally immature, there is likely little they can do to fulfill that longing, despite what you do to accommodate them. In this chapter, I will describe ways to step out of the old roles that pull you into fruitless drama with emotionally immature parents. Rather than seeking loving reciprocity, you will learn to bring a calm, observational mindset, one that prevents you from being drawn into arguments or self-doubt. The fantasy that a parent will change. Some children, even grown ones, cling to the idea that if they say or do just the right thing, their parents will finally show the warmth and understanding they have always craved. This is usually a vain hope, because emotionally immature parents remain consumed by their own insecurities or past hurts. They may outwardly appear sociable or generous, but this doesn't translate into empathy or deeper connection with you. Annie's story. Annie's mother, Betty, continually belittled her sometimes even in front of Annie's friends. Determined to repair the relationship, Annie wrote a heartfelt letter asking her mother to sit down and talk. But Betty responded with icy silence, leaving Annie feeling guilty and confused. "I'm your daughter. Why won't you even engage with me?" Here lay Annie's dilemma. She desperately hoped for proof that her mother cared, yet all her attempts at closeness pushed Betty away. Forging a new relationship mindset. When we accept that an emotionally immature parent may never respond in the loving way we desire, we can choose a different path, focusing on our own well-being. Instead of seeking genuine closeness, we aim to manage interactions so they're less hurtful or frustrating. This approach begins with letting go of old illusions that an unempathetic parent could one day become what we always needed. 3 core practices will help you avoid being hooked by a parent's immaturity. 1. Detached observation. 2. Maturity awareness. 3. Stepping away from your old role self. Detached observation. Just as an explorer observes a new culture without imposing personal expectations, you can watch your parents' behavior with minimal reactivity. Think of it as an anthropological study. What is their tone of voice? How do they respond to your attempts at conversation? Do they genuinely ask how you are, or do they shift the spotlight onto themselves? If you find yourself getting upset, notice that feeling and label it mentally. I'm angry, or I'm starting to feel guilty. That step alone can help you regain calm. When emotions run high, politely excuse yourself. You might say, "I need to use the restroom," or "we'll talk soon." then leave the room or end the call. Relatedness versus relationship. Aim for relatedness. Polite, task-oriented interaction, rather than a deeper relationship with an emotionally immature parent. If you try to elicit empathy or shared intimacy, you'll likely feel disappointed. Staying in manage mode means you preserve your own peace without expecting warm reciprocity. The maturity awareness approach. Once you've practiced detached observation, you can build upon a maturity awareness approach. Estimate how emotionally mature the other person is, then tailor your behavior accordingly. If they show signs of deep empathy, you might share more. If they act self-absorbed or dismissive, you'll protect yourself by carefully managing the interaction.
This approach has three main strategies. 1. Express and then let go. Say what you need to say calmly and clearly, but release any need for them to get it. You cannot control whether they validate you. You can only control whether you speak your truth. The real victory is in voicing your feelings, not changing theirs. 2. Focus on the outcome, not the relationship. Before speaking, ask yourself, what do I really want from this conversation? Is it to schedule a holiday plan, or to let them know you've made a decision? That's a concrete objective. If your goal is an emotional breakthrough, you'll likely leave frustrated. Keep the focus on a realistic outcome you can achieve, and let go of trying to alter the underlying dynamics. 3. Manage, don't engage. Instead of diving into emotional back and forth, gently steer conversations back to your chosen topic. Repetition works wonders with the easily distracted or defensive. I understand your concern, but we need to decide who's picking up Grandma from the airport. Persist calmly until you secure an answer or a clear outcome. Common concerns about this approach. 1. It sounds too cold. I don't want to strategize constantly. No need to overmanage every moment. If your parent is acting pleasantly, enjoy the time. But if you sense them flipping into criticism, guilt trips, or self-absorption, shift into observational mode. 2. Isn't it disloyal or deceitful to keep such distance? You are not deceiving them. You are preserving your own mental clarity. Emotional closeness can only exist when both parties show empathy. If your parent can't do this, you aren't required to expose yourself to hurt. 3. They make me feel guilty, and I can't just ignore that. Yes, guilt can be piercing, but seeing it as emotional contagion helps. Their distress doesn't automatically become yours. Practice breathing calmly, thinking, that feeling is theirs. It needn't be mine. 4. I freeze when they criticize me. In stressful moments, anchor yourself. Notice your breath, or silently count until they finish. If needed, cut the interaction short. Being subject to harshness or manipulation doesn't help either of you. 5. They did support me, paid for school, gave me gifts. Isn't it wrong to think they're immature? You can appreciate any material or practical help while acknowledging their emotional limitations. Providing for you physically doesn't negate their inability to offer empathy or genuine understanding. Annie's story continued. After repeated silent treatment from her mother Betty, Annie decided to try maturity awareness. She invited her parents to a brief public event, a soccer game for her kids. She kept it short, not seeking heartfelt conversation, just straightforward relatedness. Betty arrived late and showed minimal interest. Instead of feeling wounded, Annie remained calm, viewing the interaction from a neutral vantage point. When Betty later responded to phone calls with icy reserve, Annie didn't chase after reassurance. She politely ended the call, saying she would look forward to connecting in the future. This marked a turning point. Annie no longer felt guilty, only sad that this was all her mother could offer. It was liberation from the old role of a pleading child, hoping her mother might soften. While it didn't solve the fundamental lack of warmth in their relationship, Annie regained emotional freedom, secure in herself. Stepping out of an old role self,
Realizing that you've played a role self is the doorway to liberation. If you recognize you've been the dutiful daughter, family clown, or fixer, you can choose to stop performing that part. Rochelle's story. Rochelle's demanding mother expected immediate responses to her every whim. Rochelle used to feel compelled to serve as the good daughter, equating her mother's approval with her own worth. But once Rochelle began to observe rather than react, she saw her mother's behavior for what it was.
Rochelle stopped rushing to fix everything and started saying no when she felt drained. By stepping away from that old role, Rochelle reclaimed her boundaries and noticed she could enjoy more neutral moments with her mother without feeling constantly on edge. Keeping a grip on your own thoughts and feelings. Above all, the goal is to stay in your own mind. Remind yourself of the tangible objective for each interaction, whether it's scheduling a family gathering or setting a boundary. If your parent tries to drag you back into an old dynamic, perhaps criticizing your life choices or acting like you owe them gently but persistently, guide the conversation back to your intended topic or end it. Caution is wise when your parents display uncharacteristic openness. It might tempt you to think, finally, they do care. But it can also be a fleeting gesture, and slipping back into old hopes might trigger their panic or defensiveness, renewing the cycle. Hold on to your adult self, even if they momentarily appear kinder. Summary. As children, we needed our parents' acceptance. As adults, we can see them more objectively, recognizing that not all parents can or will provide emotional intimacy. The maturity awareness approach helps you stop yearning for the impossible and instead navigate each interaction with calm purpose. You will avoid slipping into old roles, express yourself succinctly, and protect your emotional well-being. While it may seem less warm than your ideal, this approach preserves your clarity and dignity when dealing with emotionally immature parents. In choosing to observe rather than engage, you spare yourself repeated heartache. And with energy reclaimed, you can channel your warmth and openness into relationships that do reciprocate genuine care. Chapter 9. How it feels to live free of roles and fantasies. I have witnessed how the weight of old roles can stifle one's spirit as surely as any set of chains. When we are young, it often seems we must contort ourselves to fit another's demands, especially if our parents lack the emotional warmth we crave. In time, though, we can shed such self-denying habits, stepping into a life guided by our truest self. Here I shall share how it feels to break free of a family dynamic that once confined you, and how you might approach the world unburdened by the fantasies and roles that once shaped your every step. Family patterns that may be holding you back. If your parents were too uneasy to handle genuine closeness, they may have discouraged any glimmer of your individuality. As a child, you likely learned that being too expressive was dangerous. Real thoughts and feelings threatened to rattle your parents' calm. You may have stifled your own desires, surrendering them to the anxious needs of a parent who demanded control. An internalizing child, ever alert to others' moods, may swallow their own hopes and joy to keep the peace. Such parents often leave their children ashamed of simple human behaviors like enthusiasm or honest anger. In the end, children conclude they mustn't ever ask for what they want, nor speak of how they truly feel, adhering to an internalized parental voice. As we grow, our parents' judgments echo in our minds. This parent voice can take many forms: a nagging whisper that we are lazy or selfish, or a mocking tone telling us we are never enough. It feels so natural that it's easy to mistake it for our own conscience. But know this: if that voice is harsh, repressive, or unkind, it stems from your parents' old fears and judgments, not your true self. You need not obey it. Step by step, you can recognize it for what it is and question its validity. Is it truly your own wish that you must strive ceaselessly to please others? Or is that voice merely a remnant of how your parents forced you to be? Freedom to be human and imperfect. When a critical inner voice has roots in your parents' insecurities, it may constantly demand perfection. Such rigidity leaves no space for compassion or human warmth. Yet no warrior can hold his shield aloft every hour of the day. Even the strongest among us requires reprieve. Imagine how your life might change if you allowed yourself to be less than perfect, to do things at your own pace, to rest when you tire, to celebrate small victories without immediate self-critique. Rather than condemning every slip as evidence of failure, treat mistakes as a normal part of your journey. This shift in mindset offers a deep sense of release, as if you finally stepped off a battlefield you never asked to fight on. Freedom to have your genuine thoughts and feelings. Your mind belongs to you alone. No one else has the right to dictate what you should think or feel. In a household ruled by insecurity, you might have learned that certain thoughts or emotions made you bad. Yet the heart feels what it feels. Simply acknowledging your sadness, your anger, your joy does not wrong anyone. Grant yourself permission to let feelings appear and pass without self-condemnation. They are like waves on the ocean, natural and transient. By accepting them, you reclaim a vital piece of your true self, freedom to suspend contact. At times, the surest way to safeguard your peace is to step away from interactions that harm you. This might involve pausing contact with a parent whose behavior remains cruel or dismissive, or who refuses to respect your boundaries, though guilt or second-guess you. This might involve pausing contact with a parent whose behavior remains cruel or dismissive, or who refuses to respect your boundaries, though guilt or second-guessing may follow. Such a break can be life-giving. You do not have to subject yourself to unrelenting hurt just because someone is family. You can still find freedom from old patterns, even if you're not currently speaking with your parents. Real transformation grows from within. No external conversation can replace that self-awareness and self-trust you build privately. Freedom to set limits and choose how much to give. While you might decide not to cut contact, setting firmer boundaries is another path. Limit how often or how long you meet, or how much you open yourself up to old criticisms. Of course, parents unaccustomed to boundaries might rail against them, but each protest offers you a chance to stand firm in your own needs. You have a right to say, enough, whenever someone claims more than you can give. Freedom to have self-compassion. If you were raised to focus solely on others, the concept of self-compassion can seem foreign, even selfish. Yet caring for yourself is not indulgence, it's the bedrock upon which you can build a healthy existence. Imagine yourself as a child once more, doing your best to navigate chaos. If you saw that child exhausted or in pain, wouldn't you want to comfort them? Show yourself that same grace now, letting tears or grief surface when you realize how difficult it was. Be patient, these feelings arrive in waves, but each wave carries you closer to healing. A wise teacher once said, "Tears are proof you're integrating new understanding. Let them flow without fear." Freedom from excessive empathy. Those who grow up as pleasers often overextend compassion, taking on others' suffering as if it were their own. There is a line between healthy empathy and enmeshment, and you must guard it carefully. You can care about someone without feeling responsible for removing all their unhappiness, especially if they don't truly want to change. Freedom to take action on your own behalf. In a home where you felt unseen, you might have concluded your needs didn't matter, leading to a sense of helplessness. But helplessness, though learned in childhood, is not a life sentence. You can break that pattern by asserting yourself, seeking support or expressing what you desire, even if you once believed no one would listen. Small steps forward are enough. Telling a parent no, shifting a conversation so it includes your perspective, or asking for something you want. Each act rebuilds the faith in yourself that your childhood may have undermined. Freedom to express yourself. Perhaps you long believed that if your parents loved you, they'd naturally understand you. It doesn't always happen that way. You can still speak what's in your heart, accepting that they might not fully grasp it. It's the courage of disclosure that counts, not whether the listener changes. In time, you might find it less hurtful that your parent fails to empathize. After all, you're no longer a child reliant on their approval. You can stand by your own truth, unapologetic and secure. Freedom to approach old relationships in new ways. When you set aside unrealistic hopes for emotional intimacy with an immature parent, your interactions can become more tolerable. Perhaps they relax, sensing you no longer hunger for them to be different. Some parents may even become a touch more genuine when the pressure of your need dissolves. Yet, if they don't, you are not undone. You rely on yourself and supportive people elsewhere. Freedom to not want anything from your parent. The greatest release often comes when you realize you no longer want anything from someone who cannot give. Many parents promote the myth that they alone can bestow worth or belonging on you. But if they are too self-absorbed or disdainful to offer meaningful love, then relying on them for closeness is like seeking water in a dry well. You owe it to yourself to look elsewhere for true empathy and care. Summary. When you cease twisting yourself to fit a role, the good child, the obedient one, the caretaker, you open vast horizons of possibility. Yes, your inner critic might snarl at you for daring to put your needs first. Yet in choosing your own path, you gain the rich rewards of self-respect, emotional freedom, and renewed confidence in your instincts. You are no longer a child, helpless to shape your life or bound to please an anxious, unresponsive parent. Now you can stand firmly in your own presence. You can embrace your feelings, knowing they are natural. You can weigh your decisions, guided not by old fears, but by genuine honesty with yourself. Soon, you'll see that this inner freedom allows you to form deeper, more authentic bonds with others who are capable of returning true warmth. This is where real strength lies, in daring to show yourself to the world, free of old roles or fantasies that no longer define you. Chapter 10. How to identify emotionally mature people. I have sailed many seas, yet none so vast as the hearts of those who yearn for true closeness. I have also seen how the bitter winds of loneliness can shape a child grown tall, uncertain that real warmth or true companionship could ever be found. Perhaps you too have felt that ache, forged in your younger years by parents who could not see your worth. Yet hear me now. This world holds men and women who are capable of meeting you as an equal in spirit. Today I wish to show you how to discern those with the emotional maturity to stand beside you in mutual trust and respect. The lure of old patterns. From our earliest steps, we carry an inborn belief that what is familiar is safe. So, if you grew up with parents whose self-absorption starved you of emotional nourishment, you might unconsciously seek the same coldness in your friendships or romances. This is no strange coincidence. It's a pattern burned into your bones. Sometimes you may find a considerate soul tedious compared to the brash excitement of someone more selfish, only to be hurt anew by their careless ways. A wise traveler must learn to recognize these snares. A fleeting spark can often mask old wounds being reopened, rather than genuine connection. With mindful awareness, you can hold steady and judge whether this person is truly worthy of your heart. Recognizing emotionally mature people. Many are the qualities that make a person a sturdy companion, but we can group them into 3 pillars. 1. Realistic and reliable. 2. Respectful and reciprocal. 3. Responsive. Think of these like the timbers and beams of a strong ship. Without them, no journey can be safely ventured. 1. Realistic and reliable. They work with reality rather than fighting it. Such souls accept that life may not bend to every whim. They push for change when possible, yet also adapt with grace where it isn't. Their mind is not at war with how things are. They can feel and think at the same time. They do not cast aside reason when emotions arise, nor do they become ice cold when upset, because they keep their hearts open
They stay capable of seeing multiple perspectives. Their consistency makes them reliable. They do not treat you kindly one day, then scornfully the next. Rather, they stay grounded. You'll find them with the same good spirit day to day, forging a stable trust with those around them. They don't take everything personally. If you slip up or voice discontent, they don't flinch or rage as though you've struck them. They know they are neither saints nor devils, and can brush off small missteps with gentle humor. 2. Respectful and reciprocal. They respect your boundaries. These ones step carefully around your personal space. They do not insist on prying, nor do they dismiss your feelings as trivial. If you say, "Enough," they heed your words rather than ignoring them. They give back. In a balanced partnership, there is an ease of giving and receiving. Look for those who aren't content to watch you give and give while offering scant comfort in return. They contribute actively, cherishing the flow of kindness that goes both ways. They are flexible and compromise. Well, a worthy companion can shift their stance without feeling shamed, so long as it supports both of you. True compromise doesn't leave you feeling robbed. It leaves you both satisfied with the path forward.
They're even-tempered. Some storms can be weathered if a person's fury fades swiftly. But if a man or woman bristles at every small inconvenience, or withholds affection in silent punishment, be on guard. That temper might become your prison in time. They're willing to be influenced. Pride can blind many a warrior. But a mature soul hears another's wisdom and thinks, "I can learn from this." They do not see each difference of opinion as a battle to conquer. They're truthful. Even the strongest knights may stumble, but earnest honesty cements trust. They'll own their mistakes and offer truth at moments that demand it, rather than twisting your mind with deceptions.
They apologize and make amends. Some believe an apology is an act of weakness. In truth, it's an act of courage. If wrong is done, they pledge to do better. Words are backed by deeds. They do not vanish behind glib excuses. 3. Responsive. Their empathy makes you feel safe. With them, you're not alone. They strive to see the world through your eyes, offering comfort without disdain or impatience. The strong do not fear gentle understanding. They make you feel seen and understood. Many will talk at you rather than with you, but an emotionally mature person listens as well as speaks. Their face and words reflect genuine curiosity in your life. You'll sense their delight in witnessing who you are. They like to comfort and be comforted. There's a certain warmth in those who give reassurance freely and who allow themselves to receive it when troubled. This is how bonds deepen, with each side trusting they can lean on the other. They reflect on their actions and try to change. If an error is pointed out, they'll weigh your words seriously. Self-reflection needn't be a sign of shame. On the contrary, they see it as a chance to grow, rather than a blow to their pride. They can laugh and be playful. Humor ties hearts together, easing tensions and inviting closeness. Such people can joke without cruelty. They aren't compelled to mock or belittle for the sake of feeling superior. Instead, laughter becomes shared joy. They're enjoyable to be around. When with them, life carries a natural ease. You don't wear yourself trying to decipher hidden meanings or dodge outbursts. Even small errands or quiet evenings gain a pleasant glow of contentment. What to look for in meeting people. Online. Modern life often leads us to encounter new friends or partners across digital fields. Though the medium is different, the traits above still reveal themselves. Pay attention to how they respond to your messages. Do they reciprocate and show genuine interest, or rush for intimacy without hearing you out? The pacing and respect of boundaries you see online can be a glimpse of how they'll act in person. Exercise. Assessing others' emotional maturity. Here is a list of traits to watch for, whether in old or new acquaintances. The more check marks someone earns, the higher their capacity for a supportive, satisfying relationship. Realistic and reliable. works with reality rather than against it, feels and thinks at the same time, stays consistent and dependable, avoids taking everything as a personal slight, respectful and reciprocal, honors your boundaries, gives back in kind, shows flexibility and seeks fair compromise, maintains a calm temper, accepts influence from you or others, tells the truth, apologizes and works to change when at fault, responsive, uses empathy to help you feel safe, notices and affirms your viewpoint, freely offers or receives comfort, reflects on their actions and sincerely tries to improve, shares humor in a kindly, non-hurtful spirit, brings warmth and enjoyment to your time together. Any person who displays these qualities promises a far healthier bond than those who do not. It's not about perfection. It's about a genuine willingness to care, listen, and adapt, developing new relationship habits. Even if you've gained a finely tuned eye for maturity in others, remember that your own actions matter too. Consider these fresh approaches. 1. Be willing to ask for help. Don't let pride trap you. Your burdens can lighten if you trust others will answer your call. 2. Be true to yourself, even if others resist. If your intentions are kind, but people react poorly, that reflects more on them than on you. 3. Sustain and appreciate emotional connections. Reach out to old companions. Maintain closeness with those who show you real friendship. Show gratitude for the help they give. 4. Set reasonable expectations for yourself. Perfection is a brittle sword, prone to shatter under pressure.
Act with sincerity, not from fear of being flawed. 5. Communicate clearly and aim for specific outcomes. If you need something from someone, let them know gently but directly. Clarity can dissolve misunderstandings before they harden into resentments. Exercise. Exploring new ways of being in relationships. Being willing to ask for help. Practice stating your needs plainly. Being yourself. Whether people accept you or not, speak your truth respectfully, then allow others their own reactions. Sustaining and appreciating emotional connections. Remember to reciprocate the care you receive. Having reasonable expectations for yourself. Embrace your limits. Rest and self-care are not failings. Communicating clearly and actively seeking the outcomes you want. People can't read your mind, so offer them honesty instead. Over time, these changes in your own behavior will attract those who can truly meet you with empathy and warmth, and distance you from those who thrive on exploitation or drama. Summary. When you've grown up with parents unable to nurture you at a deeper level, you may wonder if any relationships will ever be free from disappointment. Yet there are those in this world who listen attentively, offer fair compromise, and genuinely seek connection. Learning to identify them can spare you from reliving old wounds. Arm yourself with the knowledge of these traits, and watch for evidence of them in those around you. While no one is perfect, emotionally mature people display enough of these qualities to build a strong, resilient bond. And do not forget, the person you must also attend to is yourself. By practicing clear communication, self-acceptance, and mindful kindness toward your own limitations, you become a worthy friend or partner in return. The most profound truth remains that love and closeness can exist for those who see each other plainly and still choose to stand together. With these skills, you can step out of the shadows of childhood sorrow and into the company of those who are strong yet gentle. Only then will you cast off emotional loneliness and sail onward to a life rich with shared trust and honest warmth. Epilogue. I have walked many paths, and I know well that turning your gaze inward can rouse both sorrow and wonder. Stepping beyond the old stories you once believed, examining who you really are and why your family behaved as they did, can bring forth aching memories of what you lacked or never had. Such self-discovery is neither light nor easy, yet it can be the very spark that awakens you to a deeper life. Some might say it is better not to know, to keep tucked away the hurtful secrets that shaped us. But I have seen that truth carries gifts of its own, a feeling of being more fully alive, of noticing the small and radiant things in the world. Even the harshest light can reveal what is precious around us. When we finally see our past for what it was, we open the door to a clearer and more peaceful present. You may find yourself marveling at how old threads reach through entire generations, or feeling a bittersweet pang as you grasp how those who raised you too were trapped by what they could not face. In learning all of this, you may wonder, am I better off for knowing? Such is the question each of us must answer. Yet in my time, I have watched many men and women bloom when they free themselves from the false dreams and hollow roles forced on them in childhood. No longer must they struggle or feel alone. Though regrets may linger, relief and bright hope swirl together, the world seeming to open anew under their feet. It is like being granted a second life, one you can guide with clear eyes, now that you finally understand yourself and those who came before you. And so, my child, I ask, is it worth the pain to step into this new life you carve for yourself?
If you feel it is, then we stand together in celebration of your strength. Take heart in what lies ahead. However dark the old shadows once seemed, you have claimed your place in the sun. And in that choice, in living twice within a single life, you affirm the power of truth and the unbreakable spirit within you.